The transmission cut out after the pronouncement. Apparently, the GM was more than a little sick of us giving him crap. Val looked at me as continued work and spoke up.
So wait, now we've got to go all the way across the continent?
I shrugged.
Actually, if I heard it right, I have to cross the continent. Ravajatik told me specifically he didn't mention you going along.
Val tossed her axe into a nearby stump.
That's suicide.
I sighed.
Look, we want folks back, and me thinking is, the Emperor's trying to see where our limit is. If I tap out, he knows it's too big for us. But truth is, we've got folks that do this sort of stuff back home. Past the survival stuff, it's mostly just boring when you get down to it. It's like running a marathon. It's more about having the will to keep going than it is your actual running ability. But fact is, we've thrown 'em off, I reckon. Even with all these species around us, we're still getting the looks. Like right now, with everyone wondering how we're still moving, or my arm healing up. I don't think they got a clue what all we're capable of, and they're trying to get a lock on that. Problem is, they ain't got the faintest idea what to test us with. I mean, think about trying to figure out what all a bear can do, but you've never seen a bear before. Sure, you'll pick they're big and strong and all, but how do you find out the rest?
We grabbed another stump to put in place.
Besides, I'm more worried about these upcoming rules changes. Depending on how the Emperor and Rav run this, it could get turned into a death match. But I don't think they're going that route. The other thing is to push us, like with this storm, to keep on throwing shit at us and see what sticks. We need to focus on getting ourselves more up to speed. What is that woman doing now?
Val and I looked to the field where Marilla and her team were working on the nanofabric. Across the glade now, the fabrics had been cut into sections. Judging from where I was, each section was about 10 feet wide with straight lines of it crossing the entire glade. At one end of the glade, the fabric was secured, tied off to trees, while at the other, big rollers had been set up, with 2 people on each roller, as well as 2 people down near the other end, pulling out knives to cut the fabric. Val cocked her head to the side.
Oh my God, she's industrialized the fabric creation.
What?
I wasn't particularly seeing it, but as I watched, it became evident. The fabric got cut, with Fionn calling out what had to be a Vendrick's cadence meant to keep rhythm, and the rollers then began to slowly turn the rollers from their end. The effect on the fabric, however, was the main event. It wasn't moving except that it was. The timing of the rolling was being matched to the growth of the fabric, so the end didn't appear to move, but was in fact being gathered up on the rollers just as fast as the fabric tried to attach to the secured end. As some of the rolls filled up, the fabric at the rolling end would be cut and the wooden shaft holding it removed. Others would come over and take it while the rod would be replaced, and the process would start again.
Well, I'll be damned. Not sure what we'd be using all that for, but it's impressive if nothing else,
I said, blinking. Val signaled us to get back to work, but kept the conversation going.
Well, if we're talking gardening, she probably has enough now to tarp the whole field, which is great, because it means we can keep weeds and stuff from growing up between our plants. The fabric isn't watertight, so the soil's still getting its water, but without sunlight, nothing would grow anywhere the tarp is. You just cut individual holes for the plants, and you're good to go. Then figure it would probably be nice if we could actually change out of the suits we've got on. We can cover the walkways, make extra layers for blankets. She's probably got some other things in mind herself, and then there's whatever you can think to do with it.
On that point, a plan started forming, the rolls themselves. Yeah, sure, an individual layer of the fabric wasn't watertight, but if you put a whole bunch of layers on top of each other, you could get close. They had weight, mass, and size, so they could, as rolled, hold up to the winds we were starting to get. They would just need posting to anchor them. Better yet, you could attach them to each other, creating a full barrier held together by the fabric itself. Then there was what all you could break the fabric down into. Done correctly, we could fully encase the camp, protecting from at least most precipitation, if not all of it, and the same was true of wind. What else could be done? It was in these ruminations that I finally felt it, late in the afternoon as we finished up the 5th yurt. The first pings of hail and rain, the wind was picking up, the storm had come.
I heard Keith utter fuck quietly just before the hail started and didn't realize what it was until the first stones started to fall. Time was up. The storm was here, and it was coming in hard. The wind was picking up as well, driving the hail as we all started moving for shelters, except for down in the field. Marilla's project with the nanofabric had a number of potential applications, certainly, but now we got to see her most immediate one. Down below, teams were rolling out fabric across the field, tying the lengths off so that the fabric was not completely taut, but just enough to stay put. Protected from the winds by the bluff itself, the fabric would hold essentially still. Hailstones hit, but did not damage the fabric, catching where they fell. She had protected our small crops from the storm, and neither Keith nor I had thought of it.
Val, start getting folks inside. We'll need to get ourselves a head count. Make sure we're not forgetting anyone.
Keith's voice snapped me back to the bluff, and I started helping people get to shelter. The smaller races were having a lot of trouble, being affected more by the wind than the hail itself. Keith broke off, heading down to Marilla's group, and I started my head count. We had divvied everyone up ahead of time. The first yurt would have Keith, myself, Marilla, Fionn, Traig, Hoda, Prodigal, Hearth, Azaku, and Chethuxil. With 5 yurts, 3 of the yurts held 8 people apiece. Ours had 10, with 1 yurt holding 9. For the sake of sanity and ease, the 9-person yurt had the Enod family in it. We kept species together, and also set aside 1 yurt for our more nocturnal species. We had 2/3 of our people fully inside, and I reported the numbers to Prodigal, who in turn sent those numbers to Keith. Keith informed us that he has the rest accounted for, and our own sense of minds confirms that we have all 49 members of the tribe present.
The general read, as you humans put it, is that everyone is slightly unnerved by the storm, having never seen anything on par with it, but have faith in you and Keith to see things through. The Enod baby is crying, afraid of the storm, but otherwise seems in good health. But the mother is worried and wants to confer with Keith.
Thank you. Let me know when Keith is back up here,
I said, and then made a point to start bringing food and water to everyone. Eating was a basic building block of life, and in my experience, people with full bellies were noticeably less anxious, a point we needed right now. Ducky tried to help, but the wind and hail were just too much, and I had to send her back inside her yurt. She looked hurt, but this wasn't the time to risk serious injuries or illnesses. In anticipation of the storm, the kitchen area had been tarped, both with some actual tarp for the roof, as well as nanofabric for the walls. The nanofabric was designed to wick moisture away from the body, so it would be useless to us against the rains. But as long as it was vertical, the rains would simply bleed through only a little, while the rest continued down to the floor. It now resembled a very weirdly colored army tent, with a raised floor to keep the water at bay and keep us from slipping in mud. One end had been built around the clay oven, carefully spaced to make sure that none of the fabric or tarp got close enough for a stray ember to catch. The oven itself had its own clay closure, to fully seal in the heat, both for safety and to be able to maintain higher temperatures in the oven. Right now, however, the working oven was just incredibly warm and inviting against the cold rain and hail. I set myself to the task at hand.
All right. So what we're working on here is getting everyone fed right away. In emergency situations like this one, food can be incredibly important, not only as physical nourishment, but mental and emotional nourishment as well. Son of a bitch. Keith's got me doing it now too. Fuck it. If it works, it works. Okay now, where was I? Right, feeding people. Now the general idea is to keep it as a small meal, more of a snack, just to help settle people's nerves. In humans, we have a natural instinct to eat during crises for the most part, but we also know that we have to keep it within a certain threshold. We don't want to gorge ourselves and get sick, and we also don't want to overeat and run down our food stores. So what's everyone going to be eating?
I pulled the lid off of the big pot we were using for stock and gave it a whiff.
Well, that's sort of an interesting question, it seems. We have a variety of people here, with a range of diets. Humans are omnivorous, so we'll eat just about anything. This is also true for a number of others, such as the Rothani, the Asu, and the Skrens. The Trials, Prodigal, and Hearth don't actually eat, just requiring water and sunlight to stay out of dormancy. Hopefully, we'll have enough sun for them while the storm is going. The Vendrix mainly eats fish, mushrooms, and some vegetables, And I'm not sure if that's just cultural inclination or a more specific dietary requirement. The Anod are herbivores, while the Bosuts are carnivores. Though they seem extremely interested in the yams we're growing. I'm pretty sure their preferred diet is a near match for Earth dogs. So we have sort of a variety of stuff here, as best as I can put together with what we have. We have a massive amount of fish stock, for instance, since we had to stock up before the storm. I'll check the smokers on those in a bit, and then whatever we're not using is going in what Keith deemed his backwoods fridge. Aside from that, we have a similar mushroom broth.
I broke off and sighed as I taste tested. We desperately need to find a way to make or get salt and butter. I never really thought about it back home, but God, I miss butter. I mean, it's not impossible, come to think of it. I made Amish-style rolled butter with Cassie for a science project. Another sigh.
But that assumes having dairy, which is distinctly not a thing as yet. Keith seemed to be musing over a way to rustle up some cattle, but honestly, he's just been pulled in so many different directions, he hasn't had the time to focus on it. I do see him muttering to himself about various things at times. I can see the process in his eyes. It may look like he's making things up as he goes, but it isn't really like that. I'm pretty sure he's just thinking so rapidly that it looks made up, but that southern drawl of his isn't generally considered the most intelligent-sounding accent on Earth, so he's probably used to having it held against him. Oh God, Cassie's gonna sound just like him soon enough.
I sort of paused as I kept going on about Keith and realized I was actually smiling talking about him. And for the first time, bringing up Cassie hadn't felt like I was never going to see her again. And then there was the last thought itself. Cassie would start sounding like him. For a moment, I just sat with the thought. I had simply started assuming a life with him, that he would be enough of a part of hers that she would pick up his mannerisms. When had that happened? When did he go from a question to a status quo? Certainly he was good-looking, and I liked so many things about him, but liking someone is so much different than seeing them as a permanent part of your life. I'd done so well at keeping my guard up, or I thought I had. As if summoned by the thought, the flap of the tent moved, and Keith stepped inside, kicking the mud off of his boots and pulling his waterproof off to hang it by the flap.
Hey, y'all need help in here?
I shook my head as he pulled up next to me, and without thought, I put my head on his shoulder.
Nah, Hoda's gonna be helping me. And Marilla seems to have some sort of thing she wants to talk to me about. Everyone's inside and food's about ready, so you should probably check on the rain catchers and get some rest.
He squeezed around my waist and kissed me on the top of my head.
As you wish.
And then, donning his waterproof, he went back out. I swear to God, I know he's doing a reference bit, but I just don't know where it's from, and it's driving me nuts, and always with that smile on his face when he does it. I went back to prepping food until Hoda came in, not even bothering with a waterproof.
Is the food ready yet?
Almost. There's a lot here, but it'll be a few minutes.
Hoda nodded and took a seat out of the way, striking up a small pipe in the corner, in a chair that was a combination of wood and nano fabric. I chuckled a bit. There was an entire little coterie of pipe smokers who had been building since we'd started coming together. It had started with Ragnar, Greltha, and Keith, and had steadily increased. Hoda shifted a piece of the fabric for the wall and blew the smoke out.
Have you decided to be a wife to Keith yet?
I slightly choked on some of the fish stock I was testing.
I'm sorry, what?
She sat forward, amber eyes intent as always, looking at mine directly.
You have mated with him previously, that much is known, but you seem hesitant to choose being his wife.
Alien cultures. Sigh.
It doesn't generally work that way, at least not where I'm from. How does it work on your world?
Hoda shrugged and sat forward after sending more smoke out the side of the tent.
You see a male that you want to care for, you take him, and you become his wife. A popular male will have several wives. Traeg has 4 wives. He is quite popular, but I refuse to be 5th in anyone's order. I have not taken a husband as yet, but Keith is a good one from what I have seen of him. He is strong and brave, but clever, and I like the manner in which he dotes on Ducatha. It speaks well to how he will be as a father. He does not attempt to make himself look stronger, look tougher than he is. You should make your choice soon. to be his first and secure your place in the order before you return to your world.
The statement shocked me on multiple levels, the largest of which was that it was the longest string of speech I'd heard from Hoda in the time we'd known her. Elsewise, I'd heard of some Native American tribes that had relations this way, where it was the women who chose men to be the wives of, but it was the first time I'd seen it up close. The dichotomy was interesting. A male with a solid reputation would have multiple wives, while someone who was boorish would accrue few or none. The way she spoke of it, though, was also of interest. She had not spoken like a girl being into a boy, but like my Uncle Tim talked about chess strategies. This wasn't a purely romantic concept for her. It was one of social order, standing and honor.
I don't really know how to respond. I mean, our cultures are very different, even on Earth. The prevailing relationship model of current is monogamous, though that isn't really the case universally. Y'all's way doesn't sound bad or anything. It just ain't really the way we think of it for the majority of humans.
Hoda's head went to the side, a gesture I'd seen Keith do enough that I started laughing hard. I was wiping tears from my eyes when Hoda asked,
What amuses you so much?
People are picking up Keith's mannerisms. I guess myself as well. You cocking your head to the side, the pipes, me saying things like y'all and ain't. I just got an image in my head of great galactic species saying something like, hey y'all, I reckon I'll go on down and hit up the bar. And it is hilarious. On Earth, his particular accent is considered a commoner's way of speech, to put it nicely. There must be linguists on Earth weeping tears of blood at the idea of a thick Tennessee drawl as being the human accent by decision of the wider galaxy.
She just smiled.
I like how he speaks.
I got control of myself and wiped a last tear from my eyes, focusing on portioning out food as we kept talking.
As to my relationship with Keith, I want it. I had a moment where I just assumed it even, but I'm afraid.
Hoda simply looked at me in the eyes.
Then it is done. You are his first wife. Everything else is just getting past pain.
Dealing with the goal was both the simplest and most frustrating part of a number of conversations. They were blunt to the point of insult as the norm, and rarely cared for complications or nuance to things. I breathed.
That's not precisely true. Keith was married before to Kendra. She's beautiful, and they had a daughter, Heather. He lost them a few years ago.
Hoda started gathering up the first load of food.
It changes nothing. She was the first, but she is looking on now, seeing his life. He is not one to live his life alone, so you will ascend to the position of first wife.
She didn't wait for a response, taking up the food and departing. I was just stuck there for a bit, unable to speak or think. I was about 90% certain that Hoda was angling to become Keith's second wife, but she hadn't stated it outright. Was it a politeness on her end?
Val, I have a project for us.
I nearly jumped out of my skin as Marilla entered, already talking.
Jesus Christ!
Fionn came in behind her, setting down one of the large shell cases, and with a hand motion from Marilla, bowed to her, then me, and departed, his steps sounding in the direction of the yurts. This was not great. We didn't necessarily get along that well. Marilla was ambitious, and she was on some sort of tear. I knew what it was. I'd grown up in that atmosphere. Keith might not see it properly, but the woman was trying to outpace him. I'd been around athletes my whole life. I'd seen that desire to triumph for the vast majority of my life. If Hoda was trying to become a wife, Marilla wanted a rival. She was like a sprinter who's just come off of an injury and can finally compete again, only to see someone else on her running team as the leader. She wanted it, and it certainly wasn't romantic or sexual in nature. She wanted to beat him, to be able to claim a victory over him. Having a rival was big in competitions, and finding one could propel both rivals to ever higher heights. My first rival had come about early, Becky Fuller. She had longer legs than me, and her frame was lighter, and she was insufferable about it. God, I'd gotten so many skins and bruises trying to keep or beat her pace, but I'd eventually done it, and gotten to the next level. Marilla had risen to the top of her world, and Keith was the first competition she'd clearly had in a while. I shook my head, prepping the next load.
And what's this project?
She popped open the shell case, and there was a variety of smells coming out, like stepping into a store specializing in fresh herbs and spices.
Okay, so I was thinking about things, and we need more variety in our daily food for everyone, correct? Well, Keith was talking about something called a dry rub, and it got me to thinking.
Another purely human saying of both Keith and I, coming from the mouth of an alien queen. It was surreal, but I let her continue.
So these dry rubs are a type of food seasoning, right? I had Hearth help me translate the flora and fauna guides, and I've been transcribing them as best I can with those charcoal tablets Keith made. Since we have some time with the storm, my thought is that we go through all of these, and using your human cooking skills, we can figure out how to make the food better for everyone. Maybe we could even make something like your Earth snacks. I'm saying that right, yes?
The speed she was talking at was so much faster than she spoke to others with, and she was nearly vibrating with excitement. There was a gleam in her eyes that I hadn't seen before, like a dog who finally got let out back after a long time inside. Zoomies, as Cassie had put it once.
All right, we can take a look, but I need to get everyone else fed first.
Agreed.
Was all she said before grabbing up the next batch of food unbidden and quickly striding out of the tent. With both helping, I cleared out the food quickly and even had a minute to myself before both came in, Marilla bringing Hearth along, and the four of us began to sort through everything. We had some legitimate things that could be actual seasonings, aromatics, and even something like pepper. Marilla had taken the whole plants, contained in little nano fabric baggies that she'd moistened, to keep them watered evenly.
My thought on the matter is that I can keep these bagged for now. And we just take what we need, get more, and make some clay pots for them. Whatever smells nice that we cannot use, I will combine with some aromatic wood shavings and distribute them around the camp.
Body odor was becoming an issue. With so many species, each had its own scent, some more distinct than others, and Marilla was preparing to make potpourri. It needed to be a priority.
We could also work on making some better soap. Do either of you know how to do that?
Hoda shot her chin forward.
I do. It was my profession on my world. We need coal ash and animal fat at the least. Better if we use honey, milk, and some sort of oat. Pleasant smell, but not strong.
I despaired the loss of our original bar of soap, and I freely admittedly I had overused. Marilla and I shared a surprised look. Soap making was not a trait either of us would have ascribed to Hoda. She looked like something out of that Vox Machina cartoon I'd binged before getting taken. If she'd shown up with one hand and a horn of mead in the other, it would have looked fully as expected.
Well, all right, Hoda. As to our seasonings here, there are a couple of things we don't have, and it would help if we had a way to get them. Salt and butter.
Marilla jumped in here.
Well, butter needs milk, so that's going to be an issue unless we can find some sort of cattle. Salt, though, I can do. We should set up a team to work down at the coast, with maybe a seasonal camp. We can get salt from the ocean. I've mentioned this to Keith before, but things have been busy. There's so much in the ocean we could use, like seashells for lime, to use on our crops.
I considered it.
Right, I agree on that. And we could get likely bigger and more variety of fish, seafood, and the like. We'll make up a list and organize a team to do the trek. We'll have to set up supplies ahead of time. I don't want to chance a run at this without being ready for it to go wrong. Another thought. Hearth, we need you and Prodigal to move among the members of the town, I guess, and evaluate. Find out their skill sets and degrees of proficiency. We'll have a better picture of things if we can get a better idea of what everyone can do.
Hoda simply accepted the statement while Marilla was taking quick notes on her tablet.
Right. So once we have that, I assume we'll want lists, not just for supplies, but the personnel requirements for it, and what we can get. If we're talking about getting enough to be able to improve the life in town, I would need...
Her eyes locked for a moment as she calculated in her mind.
About 8 to 10 people, though 10 would be preferable. We would need perhaps a day to set up the camp, and then about a week to properly get enough, with a couple of people who can operate as haulers while the others focus on gathering. It will be easier to get the salt at the camp, rather than transporting seawater back here, but that's going to require we set up some apparatus, such as a stove, and some piping. With that, we can get the salt itself, and distill the water itself, and that can help for a few other things.
We went back and forth for a while like this until a new sound came out of the direction of the yurts, an acoustic guitar and the sound of singing and banging. Wait,
Is he playing Wellerman?
Hey everyone, hope you loved the video. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit subscribe for more awesome sci-fi content. You can also support us by hitting the thanks button or becoming a channel member. Your generosity helps us bring you more stellar stories. Every bit counts. Thanks a bunch.